initially, my whole family came from Croatia. I was born in 1942, right during World War II. I have two older sisters, and we lived in the little town of Vocin, up in the central part of Croatia, which at that time was part of Yugoslavia. And because of the war, my father was off as a soldier for quite a long time. And as the front came closer, we simply packed up all our stuff and left our farm. And we became refugees for a long time. We moved around a lot and lived in refugee camps, including the refugee camp in Dresden, Germany, for some time, and left there literally 3 days before the firebombing of that city. So I often say that I think we were blessed in many ways because while we were impacted with war and saw so much destruction and suffered hunger and all that, we were also blessed that we actually survived. We moved around with my grandparents for a long time, and then we eventually settled in Austria. We lived there for 7 years from, 1945 to 1952. Dad survived the war, so we were all a full family again, and we lived together in a barrack in Austria. And then Dad and Mother, I guess, decided that they would like to try to apply for emigration to America, and that process took a long time, but we eventually were given permission to come to America. And so when that happened, we boarded a ship on the north coast of Germany, and we came to America. And it was a 3-week sail across the Atlantic, and instead of going to New York Harbor, we docked in New Orleans for a variety of reasons. And then we had a 3-day train ride through Chicago where we switched trains and then came into Iowa. And the reason we came to Iowa is because a farmer in northeastern Iowa had agreed to accept us, be a sponsor for us, and Dad and Mother worked for him. And then we moved on from there, eventually moved to the Roseville, Green area. And from there we moved to Des Moines because there were some other Croatian people there whom we knew actually from Croatia. They were some good friends from Croatia, so we ended up in Des Moines. And I graduated from high school in Des Moines and went to Drake University just because we lived there and it was less expensive for me to go there than if I'd had to go somewhere and pay for room and board. So then I met my husband, Gary, at Drake. And then my first year of teaching was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and then we were married. And then eventually, long story short, we came back to the Orchard area so that Gary could work with his father at the Orchard Elevator and Hardware. And then we ended up with 4 children whom we raised in this area. And of course, when we moved from Croatia to Austria, I was not in school yet, but my older sisters were. And so we went to school in Austria, and we had to learn German. And then, of course, we came to America, and then we had to learn English. So that transition process that happened to us, I guess, so frequently over a number of years, where I don't think I can really explain how it impacted my sisters. All I can do is explain how it impacted me, because not knowing people and moving around so often and not knowing the language and feeling like an outcast and being treated probably just like an unwanted foreigner so many times, especially in Austria, impacted my self-concept, I think, and my feelings of courage, because I think I became rather. Maybe I'm normally introverted, but all those events impacted me a lot because I was in such strange situations so much of the time. Anyway, then we finally came to America, and like I said, I had to learn English, but finally, after a number of years, it became home, and I feel like an Iowa girl right now. I've been here for so long, and I love living here, and everything is good. We had some good experiences and some bad experiences with other people. When we came to America, I guess one of the things I like to remember is people reaching out and helping us. So, for example, when we moved to the farm in Roseville, the man that Dad worked for, his name was Matt Heinz. And he knew that we had absolutely no money. I mean, no money. And he brought us, some meat from the livestock that he had and had butchered. And he gave Dad a month's wages in advance. He allowed us to use whatever eggs were on the farm where we lived. There was a chicken coop, and we could use all the eggs that we wanted. Another farm family whom we met brought a cow and said to Mother that we could have the cow for as long as we needed. And, of course, when she milked the cow, we had all the bread and butter and cottage cheese that we needed. And other people were so kind to us and accepting that was just a true blessing and helped us to adjust to America better than we ever anticipated. Towards the end of the war and afterwards, there was an organization called the International Relief Organization that helped to resettle refugees like we were, and they worked with various governments and through churches to make that happen. So at that time, the Catholic Church had an organization called the National Catholic Welfare Conference. So the international group did work with the Catholic group to find sponsors for us. So we had no control over where we were going. And so eventually, when we had permission to leave, we made our way to Germany, got on the ship, came to America. We're transferred by train. Somehow we made connection with the farmer whom we were supposed to work for, and that kind of explains it. So we were pretty much, I think, on our own, just surrounded by mobs of people in the same situation. I think people who go through this situation like we did, and I know this is true, because of the people that we know who were also refugees, and even after we came to America, and people that we met who had immigrated, most of the people did not want to talk about the suffering they had gone through. They wanted to leave it behind. And quite often, if somebody said to a person, "Why don't you write all this down?" the person would respond by saying, No, it's over and done with. I don't want to think about it. And I think that was probably the case with my parents. That was, Dad went through 8th grade, Mother maybe went through 6th grade, so they certainly would not have even considered sitting down and writing a brief book or a memoir about experiences. People just didn't do that. And I didn't either, because I also felt in pretty much the same way that once we were here, my background was just that. It was part of my history. Nobody cared to know about it, so why bring it up? People could not relate. Not that they maybe didn't want to know, but it is not something that I brought up and therefore didn't talk about it. So it wasn't really until way, way into my adult years that once in a while my oldest sister and I would comment, we really should write some of these events down so we don't forget, because Mom and Dad had passed away by that time. My own children, really was pretty much clueless. They knew where we came from, and what we had experienced, but I cannot say that they truly, truly understood, and that's normal. So there came a point, however, when other people also said and encouraged me to write things down before I would forget them. And then I joined a local writers club, the Alpha Writers here in Mitchell County. And through that process, I believe it kind of helped me to open up and talk about things and think about things that I hadn't really taken time to think about and really put down much on paper. So one thing led to another and to another, and bit by bit I wrote down some comments. Maybe even before I joined Alpha Writers, I had some minimal notes about what had happened. But then I did more research. I found out things that I that really had affected us that I really didn't know about. And so one thing led to another until I came up with enough information that I thought I really could just write a book. And that's how it went. And I did a lot of talking with my oldest sister, who had pretty much done the same thing. And she hadn't published a book, but she had written down a lot of information, and we shared all that. So I really benefited from her memory because she was 6 years older, and so she remembered a lot of things that I did not. So that's how it all came about. And eventually, through the Alpha Writers Club, I met other people who were authors and had published books, and then I talked with them about recommending various publishers. And one thing led to another, and I eventually went with West Bow Publishing, and I published then my memoir in 2014. I have been a Catholic all my life. From the very beginning, I learned to pray and express my belief in God in various ways, but it took, I think, some years of experience and maybe becoming more mature to think back and to give God credit for so many of the things that had happened to us. I do believe that He has endowed me with some certain gifts that I did not give myself credit for so many, many years. And it isn't really until recently that I have pretty much come out of my shell and truly enjoy the traveling and the sharing with people like I never anticipated in my life. So God is opening opportunities for me that I never knew existed, and I give Him credit for all of that.